Have you ever finished watching the news, and I mean, whether it was an hour on cable or just scrolling on your phone, and realized you didn't actually learn a single useful thing?
Mm.
I'm talking about that very specific hollow feeling where you're not informed, not at all, but you are absolutely vibrating with just pure anger.
It's a feeling most of us know very well. And it raises a really provocative question, one we need to wrestle with today. What if that feeling isn't some side effect? What if it's the goal
What if the news has just stopped being journalism?
and has morphed into something else entirely? A branch of the entertainment industry, maybe.
Yeah.
Something closer to professional wrestling.
That is the terrifying but also fascinating premise we're tackling. I'm really ready to get into this one because it feels like it explains this tension we're all living in.
It does.
And just a heads up for everyone listening, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's Notebook LM, designed for deeper, more dynamic book analysis. The book we're dissecting is Hate Inc. Why Today's Media Makes Us Despise One Another by Matt Taibbi.
And this book is just fascinating because it operates on so many levels. It's a media critique, yes, but it's really a systems analysis of how information gets bought and sold today.
So we're going to look at it through our critical framework.
We are. We'll examine how media evolved from, well, a public service into what Taibbi calls a profit-driven outrage machine. And as always, we aren't just going to accept it. We're going to critique his arguments using logic and our ethical lenses to see if they really hold water.
Okay, so let's start with the man himself, Matt Taibbi. If you follow political journalism, you know the name.
Oh, for sure. Longtime reporter for Rolling Stone, very famous for his gritty, confrontational style.
He's the guy who came up with that incredible line about Goldman Sachs being a great vampire squid wrapped around the face of humanity.
That's the one. But what makes Hate Inc. so compelling is Taibbi's position. He's not some academic looking down from an ivory tower.
No, he's on the inside.
He's a confessional insider. He admits right there in the text that he took part in the very system he's critiquing now. He acknowledges using the same tricks to rile up his audience.
That gives the book a totally different feel, doesn't it? It's not an accusation.
Yes.
It's more like a plea bargain. He's saying, look at what we did.
And the context here is so important. He wrote this in the late 2010s, so we're seeing the fallout from the financial crisis, the rise of Donald Trump, and he's looking back at those huge media failures, like around the Iraq War.
That historical timeline is really the foundation for his whole thesis.
It is. Taibbi argues that the media landscape just structurally shifted during those years. If you go back to the days of Walter Cronkite, the goal was a broad church approach.
Right. You wanted the biggest audience possible, so you had to be pretty moderate. You couldn't afford to tick off half the country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Taibbi says that model is dead and buried. The new model isn't about cohesion at all.
No, it's about division.
It's about cultivating these small, ideologically pure groups, what he calls devotional audiences. The business model now depends on keeping those specific groups in a state of permanent devotional anger. That's stickier. It's easier to sell.
Devotional anger. Wow. That phrase really stuck with me. It's almost religious.
It is.
You're not just watching the news, you're attending a service to reaffirm your faith and point out all the heretics.
In a way, yes. And that leads to one of his core claims, which is a play on a very famous idea by Noam Chomsky, manufacturing consent.
Right, where Chomsky argued the media filters info to keep people passive and supportive of the status quo.
Taibbi says we've moved way past that. Now the media is in the business of manufacturing discontent.
So instead of keeping us quiet, they're actively trying to make us loud and angry.
Precisely. The argument is that news now prioritizes spectacle and conflict over just dispassionate reporting. He points to the coverage of weapons of mass destruction, the WMDs leading up to the Iraq invasion, as the perfect failure here.
I remember that section well. He talks about how even the prestige outlets, the ones that pride themselves on being rigorous like the New York Times, just amplified the official story.
They fell into a herd mentality. And this is where the manufacturing part is so key. Instead of challenging the narrative, they amplified it because it was the dramatic, patriotic story that audiences and advertisers wanted.
And as cable and the internet grew, the strategy shifted from everyone watches the same show to
target the partisan.
Which brings us straight to the two-tribe model. This was the part of the book where I felt like I was reading a manual for how my own brain has been hacked.
It's unsettling.
Taibbi basically says the media presents the world as having only two political teams in permanent combat. Red versus blue. Good versus evil. It's WWE. And he breaks it all down into his 10 rules of hate.
And these rules are essentially the playbook. If you're a news producer, these are the commandments you follow to get maximum engagement.
Let's run through a couple of the big ones, because once you hear them, you see them everywhere. Rule number 1. There are only 2 ideas.
This is just a radical simplification of reality. You're either for something or against it. There's no nuance, no third option, no, I agree with the goal, but not the method.
If you're not on Team A, you're automatically a secret agent for Team B.
It just suffocates any kind of independent thought. And that leads right to another rule. The 2 ideas are in permanent conflict. It's never about solving a problem. It's always about the fight itself.
Right. If the problem got solved, the show would be over.
And you need the conflict for ratings. And notice the kind of behavior this encourages in the viewer. Another one of his rules is root, don't think.
Ah, yes. Politics as sports fandom.
Exactly.
Root, don't think. That explains so much of social media. You don't analyze your team's play, you just cheer for them and yell at the ref.
Taibbi uses this great example comparing Sean Hannity on Fox News and Rachel Maddow on MSNBC.
Right.
Now, politically, they are polar opposites.
They'd probably disagree on the color of the sky.
Probably. But structurally,
Structurally, they're identical.
Taibbi argues they are identical. They operate with the exact same business logic. They both find a target audience, and then they feed that audience a nonstop stream of stories that validates their beliefs and, crucially, casts the other side as a villain.
Which connects to another rule: hate people, not institutions.
Yes.
You don't talk about flaws in the banking system. You talk about how that specific politician is a crook. It makes everything personal.
And making it personal is the key to monetizing it. This goes back to the religious contract we mentioned. The news isn't designed to make you mad for a moment so you go fix something.
No, it's designed to keep you mad.
As Taibbi notes, the goal is to keep you whipped up in a state of devotional anger.
Because if you're angry, you keep clicking, you keep watching. It's just a loop.
That is the entire internet advertising economy in a nutshell. Clicks, outrage, time on site.
No.
Those are the metrics. The critique explains that content that divides people simply performs better for the algorithms than content that explains things calmly.
It is honestly a bit depressing when you lay it all out like that.
It's a systemic trap.
We're basically lab rats pressing a lever for anger pellets because it makes someone else rich.
Speaking of stepping out of that trap, this feels like a good time to just take a breath. All this talk of monetized anger is intense.
It is. It really highlights the need for a counterbalance.
Which is why I want to mention the mindful moments on our YouTube channel. If Hate Inc. is about the business of outrage, then Mindful Moments is the antidote. We offer AI-powered book analysis that really focuses on reflection and rational thought.
It's about moving from that root, don't think mentality to a think, then act mentality. It's a space for the kind of nuance the 10 rules of hate are explicitly trying to erase.
So if you're feeling burned out by the wrestling match, check out our YouTube channel. But okay, back to the analysis. We've laid out Taibbi's argument. Now I want to bring in your expertise. Let's apply the Adlerian lens. We try to separate opinion, knowledge, understanding. How does Hate Inc. stack up? It's a critical distinction. So let's start with opinion. Taibbi makes some really broad claims about motive. For instance, he implies journalists consciously collaborate with figures like Trump just for profit.
Like they're all in a smoke-filled room, plotting.
He suggests a level of intentional conspiracy. That's informed opinion. It's not necessarily a proven fact. It's more likely the system selects for that behavior rather than individuals plotting it.
Okay.
But when we get to knowledge, the book is on much firmer ground. The specific documented failures, like the Iraq WMD coverage or how elections are framed as horse races, that's knowledge. It's all supported by the public record. We can see the herd mentality in action.
So the facts of what happened are solid, even if his theory about why individuals did it is more speculative.
Exactly. But the book's real strength, I think, is in understanding. This is where Taibbi just excels. He explains why the news feels the way it does by connecting business models to our psychology.
He connects the dots.
He does. He connects the fall of local ad revenue to the rise of national polarization. It's a systemic explanation. It's not just that reporters got meaner, the economy changed, and this is the survival strategy.
But the Adlerian lens must reveal a gap somewhere.
It does, in wisdom. The book is incredibly strong on diagnosis. It tells us exactly what's wrong, but it's much thinner on wisdom, which would be knowing what to do about it. How do we fix this system? He doesn't offer a real blueprint.
Right, there's no 10-step plan to save journalism at the end. It's more of a warning flare.
Which is valuable, but incomplete. Now let's shift to the ethical and civic side of things. How does the model Taibbi describes measure up against something like the Golden Rule?
Oh, it fails completely. The golden rule is about treating others how you want to be treated, assuming good intent.
Hmm.
But the two-tribe model relies on us viewing the outgroup with the least charitable interpretation possible. It
Always.
encourages us to see a caricature, a monster, rather than just a neighbor who disagrees with us.
We are trained to judge others in ways we would never ever want to be judged ourselves. If we make a mistake, it's a misunderstanding. If they make a mistake, it's proof they're evil.
And that has to have a huge civic impact. I mean, look at the benchmarks in the preamble to the Constitution. Ensure domestic tranquility, promote the general welfare.
This media model seems actively hostile to those goals. Take form a more perfect union. The business model makes polarization more profitable than cohesion. It literally pays to fragment the union.
And domestic tranquility, forget about it. You can't have tranquility when you're constantly told your neighbor is trying to destroy everything you love.
And as for promoting the general welfare, by focusing on personalities and feuds, on hating people, not institutions, the media obscures the real structural problems. It becomes harder to solve issues like healthcare because we're too busy fighting about which team is winning the news cycle.
That's a sobering point. We're fighting over the show while the theater burns down. But I do want to push back a little. Let's critique the book's logic for a second. Is Taibbi letting the rest of us off the hook?
That's a valid critique. It's a potential causal oversimplification. He paints the media as the main driver of all this hate. But what about political parties? Economic inequality? What about social media algorithms, which are different from the news outlets themselves?
Right, or even us, the audience. We're the ones clicking. If nobody watched the wrestling match, they'd cancel the show.
Exactly. By focusing so intensely on the press, he might be letting other actors and our own bad habits walk free. There's also a risk of hasty generalization.
How so?
Well, he focuses so heavily on cable news, Fox, MSNBC. But what about local journalism, public media? They're still outlets doing serious work. They might be struggling, but they aren't all hate machines.
That's true. My local paper isn't trying to start a civil war. It's telling me about the city council meeting.
And one more point on logic, about his confessional stance. On the one hand, admitting he used these tricks builds trust and transparency. But his cynicism can be overwhelming. Because he was a sinner, he sometimes assumes everyone else in the industry is just as cynical.
He projects his own motivations. That's a good catch. Okay, so as we wrap up, how do we balance all this? The strengths and the weaknesses.
I think the biggest strength is the 10 rules of hate. Even if you disagree with his conclusions, that list is an incredibly powerful tool for media literacy. It's like a pair of X-ray glasses.
I agree. Once you put them on, you can't unsee the manipulation. It gives you a vocabulary for what you're feeling.
The weakness, as we said, is that it can drift into rants and the lack of a clear solution.
So let's try to build a bit of a solution, or at least a practical application. If someone's listening and thinking, okay, I don't want to be a hate consumer anymore, what can they actually do?
First, play spot the rules. The next time you watch a news segment, challenge yourself. Ask what shared interests are missing from this two-team story. Force yourself to find the third idea.
I like that. And use that golden rule interpretation. When you see a negative story about them, whoever your them is, ask yourself, would I accept this framing if it were applied to me? If the answer is no, you're probably looking at a hate product, not news.
And finally, just shift your consumption. Move from outrage consumption to understanding seeking. Look for explanatory journalism that focuses on systems, not just personalities.
Here's a provocative thought to leave everyone with. We're analyzing Taibbi, who is analyzing the media. But as you said, he can be a cynic. What evidence would it take to change Taibbi's mind about this outrage machine? Is it possible he's trapped in his own rule of hate, that the media is the villain and can't be redeemed?
That questions the author's own epistemic humility.
Hate Inc. matters because it exposes the financial incentives behind our anger. It's a tool for self-defense.
Absolutely. If I had to summarize the key insights, they'd be, number one, the news has largely shifted from information to emotional stimulation. It's entertainment designed to provoke.
Number two,
the two-tribe model is destroying our ability to solve complex problems by forcing everything into a binary conflict. And number three, applying the golden rule to your media consumption is an act of rebellion.
how so?
Refusing to hate the other side literally breaks their business model.
I love that. Kindness as rebellion. Listen, if you want to dive deeper into all this, click the link on the screen for the full, in-depth book analysis. We've linked the book and other great resources.
And please subscribe, share, and purchase the book through our link if you can. But most importantly, think critically about what you consume.
And don't forget to check out our Mindful Moments and our podcast for more content that respects your brain. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.